Look on any website you want, look on eBay, look in the Heritage Archives. It just never comes up for sale for whatever reason. When it comes to major keys, I believe it's the least seen. Putting a run of Amazing Spider-Man 1 through 50 or 1 through 100, even in 9.0, there's no challenge to it.
Can you give people a rundown of some of the major keys that you've owned over time?
Absolutely. I think I've had 16 copies of Action 1 pass through our hands. When I bought my first copy, it was 1988. It was about a 3.0. And the first copy of Detective Comics, which I believe I've bought and sold 18 copies over the years. 50 copies of Captain America 1, 50 plus of Batman 1, Superman 1. I actually did some research. I bought and sold over 460 copies of Amazing Fantasy 15. So again, every major Silver Age key, Golden Age key.
Something that Ben and I are really into, especially the last couple of weeks, is thinking about comic book rarity. And as you know, that is a word that is tossed around very freely. But Rick, you're somebody who has seen a lot of books in your day. I'm interested to hear, as you've gone through your journey, which comic books have been very rare, regardless of what publisher.
It is interesting you mentioned. When I was putting my Timely collection together, I could not find a copy of USA 5. I think Ben will tell you he helped me look for USA 5 for probably 10 years. It was the only Timely I needed. I finally offered someone enough money to sell me one, and then all of a sudden, I think Ben, I saw the next like 4 or 5 auctions in a row because the money you pay sometimes will bring copies out into the market. And all of a sudden, I was like, man, I paid way too much for that thing. So that's a tough Timely, but really there's no Timely. There's very few DCs, a Buzzy 70 or some obscure title that are difficult. When it comes to major keys, I believe Pep 22 is the least seen of the major, First Archie and so forth. Books in terms of rarity, Dynamic 8, some of the Cheslers are extremely rare. There's Quality Comics. There's Needor's. What's the one, Ben, where he's giving the poison candy out the window?
Item 39.
There you go. That's an incredibly tough book. Wonder World 22, the Hitler skull, almost impossible. You never see it. There's a myriad of books out there that when people say, an Amazing Fantasy is rare, now it may be rare that you want to afford to pay for one. There's nothing rare about Amazing Fantasy. There's not a Silver Age book that's rare, and there are very few Golden Age books that are rare to the point that if you have enough money, you can't obtain one. But there are books like Amazing Man 22 from the Centaur publisher. There's a copy of Police Comics from Quality that you never see. Wiz 1, what is it? The black cover, 124, I think. I've seen maybe 3 copies in 50 years. Incredibly tough book. Now, there may be lots of them out there, but because it's $16 in the guide, nobody cares about it. But there are some incredibly obscure books, and a lot of them are the smaller publishers, Needor, Quality, some MLJs, Centaur, Chesler, which there may be a handful. And Gerber did a really good job of identifying where they were initially. Remember the Gerber Index 10? The rarest DC book, in my opinion, is All American Comics 4. I spent 40 years just trying to find not only a copy to own, but just to find someone that had a copy. And of course, who had it? John Burke. And he was kind enough to let me buy it from him just so I could say I've owned every superhero DC. But for the longest time, 40 years, I never owned a copy of All American Comics 4. Look on any website you want, look on eBay, look in the Heritage Archives. It just never comes up for sale for whatever reason. And you can find All American 1 and 7 and 10, All American 16. There's plenty of copies. But go look for All American 4 and see if you can find one.
Speaking of rarity, have you ever owned a Motion Picture Funnies Weekly 1?
I own the 5.5 slightly brittle page copy. I've owned both of the Timely Canadian, the Captain America, and the Marvel Mystery Annuals, which surprisingly I've seen a fair number of copies of those. Not in good shape. They're usually, 0.5s, 1.0s. Ben will tell you, 4.0s the highest graded copy, I think. I've owned one of each of those once and only once. You've done it. Okay, I did that. I didn't want to revisit it. Those are really tough books.
You did tell me that you completed an ASM run 1 through 100 in one day.
Well, so someone on the CGC boards was talking about, once again, this, it's so rare to have a ASM 1 and 9.0 or above. And this is probably, we'd have to go back and see how far back CGC goes. It's in the Silver Age thread. I want to say it was 2005 or 6. And again, having been a dealer at that time now for 25, 30 years and seen multiple of these copies and in high grade, I made the comment just offhanded on the boards that, putting a run of Amazing Spider-Man 1 through 50 or 1 through 100, even in 9.0, there's no challenge to it. As long as you have the money to do it, there's nothing challenging about that run because they were talking about how difficult it was.
Mm.
Centaurs, that's difficult. Needors, that's difficult. Quality Comics, MLJs, Fiction House, those are difficult. And of course, someone came back on, oh, it's impossible. You couldn't put that run together in years, no matter how much money you have. I took that as like Ben, maybe a little bit better
Challenge.
that day. I probably had 16 or 17 copies already in my inventory. And I went and I started calling, Stephen Fisher and Vinny Zerzola and Jim Payette. And, back then it was, Dan Halgren of Showcase New England. I called Richard Evans at Bedrock. I called all the major dealers. And in the course of about, I think, 8 hours, I had secured one through, it may have been 1 through 50, Ben, maybe one through 100. I don't remember, all in CGC 9.0 or greater. It took a couple of hours. And that was my point, is that when I posted that on the boards, and it wasn't to put this person down, it was to give some levity to the comment that it's not rare. What's your challenge? If you're financially in a period where 9.0 is unattainable, then do it in 4.0. That got me started. So I said, well, what else can I do that's fun? Because that was kind of fun. I wanted to put Superman 1 through 20 together in CGC 3.0. That's just, I had a CGC number 1 3.0. So I figured, let me find 2 through 20. And do you know that for a year and a half, I got the first 19, I got 19 of the 20 relatively quickly in a few months, not a day, but a few months. I could not find a copy of 17, which of course is the, Superman holding, I think it's Hitler and Hirohima or one of those guys. I can't remember who it is. And then I couldn't find one in 3.0, 2.5, 3.5, 4.0. And so once again, being me, I figured, you know what? One day I'll have them, but I have to recycle inventory like everybody else. I put all those books into my inventory, started selling them off at conventions. The next month, what shows up in Heritage? A copy of 17 and 3.0, which of course I had to own, so I bought it, but I never had the 1 through 20 at the same time in 3.0. I completed it a month after I had sold off most of the other copies. I've tried it twice. I gave up after about 20 years because there were three books. Amazing Man 26, I couldn't find a copy of. I couldn't find a copy of Little Giant Comics number 4, and I couldn't find a copy of, I believe, Star Rangers 15. And that was 20 years of searching. I got so close. I got a little frustrated, like I said, and sometimes we go in different tangents, and I sold off almost all of my Centaurs. And then 2 or 3 years later, like everything else, the bug bit me again. And I was actually at Win Murray's house in Chicago during the Chicago Comic Con. And I saw his set of Centaurs, like, man, I got to try this again. And this time I was successful thanks to John Burke's collection of completing, I think, 238 unique Centaurs. But I basically wanted them all. And after a little bit of perseverance, a little bit of luck, and a lot of help from a lot of friends, I was able to accomplish it. And then Hurricane Michael hit in 2018, and my comic collection, to afford to move and pay for all my losses, went up for auction. And now hopefully some other folks are enjoying the books that it took me the majority of my adult lifetime to collect.
Rick, this is a bit of an introspection question. And I think you have a trait that many collectors can um, kind of see themselves in it. And that is, you seem to be a bit on the obsessive side sometimes. And so, could you tell me kind of the pluses and minuses of your obsession?
And although I know people throw around OCD, and I know it is maybe it's a disease, whatever, but I think you have to be a little bit obsessive just to be a comic collector. And first, I can remember one day going through my collection, and I had a 1, a 2, a 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. I couldn't find my 4. Don't even remember what it was. I went on eBay. It's a dollar comic book. And at the time, I think I spent $37 to FedEx overnight that thing because it bothered me so bad that I had 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and didn't have 4 there. So there certainly is a certain compulsion to your criteria. And we all create it for ourselves, whether it be Marvel chipping, whether it be Rust, whether it be sequential order of the books, whether it's I've got to have every single appearance that Silver Surfer's in, whether it's in a Submariner book or it's in a Hulk book, and I'm not going to rest, or I'm going to keep the journey is just as important sometimes as the acquisition, because many times we have acquisitions, and yes, they're in our boxes, but we can't revisit them every day. But in your mind, man, I'm looking for Submariner 35. Got to find me a copy of, or Marvel Mystery 9, or Rick, find me this, or find me that. It's got to be that drive. So compulsion is something that, one, it started with the sequential storytelling. you had to wait a month. I remember one of the worst days of my life. Hurricane Michael's bad, and we have other days that live in infamy for me personally. But I don't remember the date in 1974, maybe it's 73, I can't remember. But I used to get a dollar allowance. I rode my bike to the 7-Eleven. I could buy 5 comic books because they were 20 cents each for a dollar. Pick them up off the rack. There was no tax on periodicals back then. So it was $1. I got 5 comic books. And I still remember to the day, the first Saturday I rode my bike up to the little 7-Eleven or Beeline Junior store, whatever it was. And I just randomly picked up the 5 books that looked interesting to me that day and laid them on the counter. And the clerk, Mrs. Vale, said $1.25. My heart sunk. I mean, I had just, as a young kid, I just lost 20% of my buying power. I went from being able to buy 5 comics. Now, she bought the first one for me, gave me a quarter, and then I was able to convince my dad up my allowance an extra quarter. But to be crushed and the compulsion started then, I couldn't buy 5 comics anymore. I could only buy 4. And that really would mess up, especially if you want to know, you know, it kind of like the TV serials. You have to read the next one because it's a sequential story. So I think that's a certain inherent trait. Not all collectors, but many collectors. It's just part of our DNA. So that's the challenge. I think collecting comics is personal to people. They do it. They want to read a great story. They love the sequential art nature. They love a particular artist or a cover artist or a writer. So it's very personal to people when you say, okay, Spider-Man 1 through 109 is impossible. It might be, but as long as you take it at your own pace and your own time and you have a consistent plan to do it and it brings you great joy, that to me is what makes, if you want to collect variants, collect variants. You want to collect the B covers and you want them only in 9/8 and you want them all CGC. I don't care what someone on Facebook says that comic books shouldn't be slabbed or they should be slabbed, or that debate will always be around. If it makes you, the collector, happy, that's what you do. And you don't listen to the other noise.